Welcome to Nostrdevs 11.
Woo! Yeah!
Nostrdevs is a Socratic discussion about developments that are happening in Nostr. And Nostrdevs does not happen with you. So if you're watching online, send a comment and I'll address it, or a question. And if I receive a good question or comment, I'll send a fat zap. If anyone's here in person who has anything to say, feel free to jump on the mic. You can throw me off if you got something better. That's how we roll here at Nostrdevs. It's very informal. So the topic for today is going to be how Vitor is breaking Nostr. People have said that he's forked Nostr, that some of the ideas that he's putting in place are going to destroy the protocol. So let's get into that. The first thing that he's been doing that's raised a lot of controversy is this pull request in the nips repo to move the kind1 definition to a separate nip. And I think this has people riled up because they feel like the nips, the core of the nips should be final at this point, that they shouldn't be still in draft phase, which I think they are. I think everything's considered draft at this point. So why would anyone want to move kind1 definition to a separate nip? From my understanding, the rationale behind this is that there's a type of client. It's basically like a Twitter clone, and it's the most common type of client in Nostr, but it shouldn't be elevated to the point where the stuff that goes along with a kind1 should be like considered the main part of the protocol. So I think the idea here is to split it out and say, okay, here's like the core of the protocol, how it works, and then for specific applications, you have their own nips. So the idea is for the Twitter clone, you can consider that to be its own like special application and separate it off. And so the associated kinds with that can kind of live in their own nips. And also, I think we're mostly just talking about moving documentation around. So I'm not really sure why people got so riled up over this one. But part of this change, I think it's more than just changing the documentation. I think Vitor is also talking about not using kind1 as a generic reply. So like, let's say you have the blog post. That was one of the first, one of the first non-Twitter clone applications that was built on Nostr. You have, NIP23. You have 10,023, the long form. It's basically like a blog post. It's like the blog stack built on Nostr. But when someone replies to that blog post, the reply is still a kind1. So I think the idea here is, could we clean this up and just have kind1 be a application specific kind that's just for a Twitter clone? I think that's what he's pushing for. I'm not totally sold on it. I think another route you could do is keep kind1 as like a generic reply kind. So it's going to depend on context. If you have a kind1 without any tags, so it's not referencing another note as a reply, that could be considered a tweet. It's a top level tweet. But you can do a kind1 that references another event, so you know it's a reply, and use a K tag. So we're starting to see K tags appear. And a K tag says, this is referring to a specific event kind.
Wait, K tag?
Yeah.
E tag?
E tag refers to the ID of the event. The K tag refers to the kind of the referenced event.
Do you think that this has more to do with like parsing tags? Does it have to do with parameterized replaceable events? Because if kind1 is your default tweet, you can edit that tweet, versus like in the scenario where you have a special reply for a NIP23, well, if that's a parameterized replaceable event, you can edit that reply.
No,
Kind of an additional feature, right?
the reply itself is not editable. You're replying to an editable blog post, basically. Now, but the other main topic I want to get into is that now kind ones are editable in a sense. So that's the other thing. The other big thing that's supposedly going to break Nostr is that edits are a thing now. So for a while, Nostr was renowned for having no deletes and no edits, right? You know, we own our typos, right? Typos are forever. And all of a sudden, Vitor has unleashed all these edits, and I think it's great. Before I move on to edits, though, I just wanted to mention on the whole debate about using kind1 exclusively for Twitter-style apps. If we look at how reposts work, I didn't realize until I dug into it this past week. We have two kinds that are used for reposts. There's kind 6, that's when you're reposting a kind 1, and there's kind 16, which is a generic repost. I had no idea about this, and it seems kind of odd to me. What's so special about kind 1 that it gets its own special kind for a repost? Doesn't it seem like the K tag would make more sense here? I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, they're sort of changing things around now that if they want to say kind ones are editable, then if you're reposting, can you go into like why there's a difference between a repost and a quote repost? Is it just because there's another? Because one can just have blank content field.
Well, if it's a repost, I think the content field would just be ignored. So a quote post is going to have additional content. That would be the main difference. A repost is almost a like, and that has its own controversy around it. Semisol just posted yesterday, stop all the repost spam, and of course that unleashed a wave of repost spam, right? Don't tell Nostrdevs not what to do, right?
Yeah, so I guess what confuses me is that, well, when Nostr first started, kind 1 was just, well, there is no spec on kind. Like the spec on kind 1 is the spec for using Nostr in general.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't anything specific about it.
Yep.
It's just kind number 1. But now it's like, well, no, kind number 1 is a specific thing.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's all these other nips that are saying, well, there's all these other extensions of the protocol that are for this specific thing.
Yep.
And now it's starting to get really confusing because what's the baseline? There doesn't seem to be a baseline. It's like saying, well, no, Nostr is for social media, and then everything, like now everything's being mauled around this one use case, instead of it just being, well, kind 1 is just a generic message.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to do repost and quotes and likes and all this other stuff, pick another event type, another kind,
mm-hmm.
and then plant your flag there and then build all this stuff out. Don't try to change what the generic message is supposed to be with all of this additional baggage.
But when you say generic message, is that still basically a tweet, or do you see it as more generic than something that's application specific for a Twitter clone?
Well, okay, so kind 1 came out before there was this stuff. And so they added it because it's like, well, I guess you could do it. It's not like reposts and quote reposts really changed what kind 1 was. Mm-hmm. Because it was really just a reference in the tag. So it also was in a sense generic. Mm. But now it's starting to, it looks like this is becoming less and less of kind 1 being a generic note.
Yeah.
And now it's kind 1 is a tweet.
That's what I'm seeing. I think it's the specialization is happening. And I personally, I embrace it. I think that it totally makes sense to recognize kind one as something belonging to a specific type of application where all the kind one clients should be as interoperable with each other as possible. But if you're building some other kind of client,
How do you do that if you don't have a generic baseline?
something like where as a kind one as a generic baseline could be like, this could be a tweet, or it could be like some other kind of social post with some system that emulates something slightly different. Like maybe it's a Reddit clone. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Well, generic is in, a kind one is just your boilerplate message with a content field, no specific tags. You don't have to interpret it any special way.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a generic note.
But doesn't that create confusion where clients don't know whether they should show it or not?
Well, it creates confusion as to, like, what if you are doing some other kind of protocol and you want to use, you want to at least try to interpret a kind one note because it's a generic note. But if it is something more specific, like it is a tweet or it's doing like a poll or a repost or has some sort of like complicated thing going on with the tags, then you don't want to try and parse that or try to interpret that. But then so what is like the generic note that if I want to write a protocol that uses a generic note that anybody can interpret in a multitude of different ways, is that not kind one anymore? Is like what's the other kind that I'm supposed to use for that?
I think with the direction development's going, if you want to have, let's say like an aggregator of some sorts, right? You don't really care if something originates from a Twitter style app or maybe some new kind of app that's being developed, but I
just want a pub sub, bro.
Yeah. You just want to see what people are talking about. You don't care in what context they're posting. I don't think you can just pull kind ones for that. I think that already went away. I mean, why would you not be interested in longer posts too? Like, I'm imagining some kind of AI app, like something that's just trying to aggregate all the content, maybe from a specific user, and see what they're posting about, whether it's recipes, blogs, kind ones. It seems like we're at a stage where you would have to just pull in everything, subscribe to that pub key, but disregard the kind. I don't see how else you could go about it. There's already a proliferation of kinds of content that people can be writing. The more context you have about the kind, the better you can interpret that. Like, let's say you're using the chat that goes along with a live event like we have for this stream right now. That's its own, as far as I know, that's a particular specific kind. I don't think it's a kind one. I'd be very surprised if it is. But Amethyst shows them as replies. Other clients choose not to. So yeah, I think if you're trying to build any kind of application that just brings in all the content, you want to look for all event kinds and then fine tune it based on what you know about the kinds. Okay, so based on all that, looking back at the two different kinds for reposts, I think to me, this looks like a holdover from kind one being elevated on its special status. And it might be baked in at this point, and that's how a lot of things on Nostr are. They're not ideal, but they get kind of baked in. But I think if I were to design this from scratch, I think it would make sense just to have a generic repost with a K tag identifying the kind that you're reposting and just be done with it. The next thing I want to move on to is having the editable kind ones. And some people are mad about this because kind one was something special in social media. It was like it was an immutable social media, right? Here's a place where people can post stuff and there's accountability. You can't just delete it, you can't edit it. And I think people had this kind of fantasy though, because, well, you can always delete. A relay can delete anything. Like what makes anything on Nostr undeletable is the sense that someone else can always have a copy of it. But that's nothing new to Nostr. That's how the internet always is. At least with Nostr, you can cryptographically prove that something was signed by someone. So before, you basically could you could screenshot something, right? You could screenshot a tweet. I was just hearing something about how Sam Bankman-Fried was deleting, I don't know if this is a true story, but he was deleting old tweets, but he would post one letter at a time because somehow it would throw off the indexing, supposedly.
It happens on Reddit too.
Yeah.
Instead of deleting a post, they'll edit it and replace the content.
Mm-hmm. So at least with Nostr, you have a much easier way to verify that something existed in the past. But edits and deletes are still possible. Anything you want to publish on Nostr is possible, right? So, we've had deletes for a while. For deletes to work effectively on the client side, the client needs to interpret it in a way where the presence of a delete event has to override the presence of the event that you're referring to. Does that make sense? Like if one relay maybe one relay still has the event. It either didn't see the delete request or it didn't honor it. But if your client chooses to interpret it in a way where the delete request itself overrides the relay having it, then you have an effective delete mechanism. And that's something you could configure in the client. Maybe you're someone who wants to see deleted events, or maybe you can have a toggle, show deleted events. So I think edits are just a continuation of that. I kind of want someone to steelman why edits are going to break Nostr. There's a full history too. So one thing I really like about the way Vitor implemented this is that he didn't go for a parameterized replaceable event. I think that's a great move because comparing this new thing of editing kind ones, comparing it to the Wikipedia style posts, I think it might have been a mistake to make the wiki posts replaceable events. Why would you not want an edit history, right? Now, there's still ways to preserve that history, but you're making it more difficult. You're making it where the relays themselves don't automatically have the history, because if the relay behaves in the specified manner, it's going to automatically delete old versions of the replaceable events. So the way the edits are implemented with the kind one, it's just a regular event kind. It's a 1010 event, and every edit is a new event. So the edits themselves are essentially immutable, but you have a history of edits, and your client can show the most recent edit as the current version of the post. So the way it's implemented in Amethyst, you can see every version. You can see the original and every edit that was made to it. Any comments so far? What do you guys think about edits? For or against them?
How is it implemented?
So you have a new event kind here. I don't know if it's mentioned. Let me search.
Is there a nip where he outlines how it works?
There must be a nip somewhere. Yeah, I wish I was better prepared to show the documentation, but
Okay, so he wants to merge his branch, so it's probably in his branch.
That period is actually.
okay, yeah. So I'm in his branch. I should be able to see a nip for edits, but I don't. Yes.
Period and Tapestry, we said.
Oh, hey.
No delete, no edit.
Yeah, so that's kind of the original vibe in Nostr. So what's going to happen if some people want to get on board with this delete and edit train and other people don't? Can that be interoperable? I think it is, right? Are there any reasons why? Would the whole protocol have to fork, essentially? Like, if some people choose to publish, delete, and edit events on top of their original immutable social media content, and then some clients choose to disregard those events, is that somehow breaking Nostr or forking Nostr? I don't think it does.
So like when you do a subscription, let's say, I don't know how he implemented it, but I thought about like an easy way to go about this. And let's say you publish a note, that note has an ID, and then any edits that you make on top of that, you just have some tag that has the ID of the original event. Because all you really need to do is you need to be able to subscribe to some identifier that will give you the history of all notes that have been published around that identifier. And then if you just want to see, you just look for the most recent one. If you want to see like the current revision of that note, then you still have the full edit history.
Yeah.
And it's useful to have both. Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with it.
Yeah, I think that works. Kieran asks now, how do you reply to an edited post? Well, if you have Amethyst, it's the only client that supports this yet. You can reply to the original post, or you can reply to a specific edit. One thing I think is really cool about having these edits is it's not just that you can edit your own posts, but you can edit someone else's post. Now, you can interpret that however you want, right? The original author could see your edit and agree with it. Maybe it was just fixing a typo. And then the original author can edit their own post. And now it's canonical as coming from them. But I think where things get really interesting is when people, it's not just a typo, but people disagree over something. And now you're having edits come in with conflicting ideas on something. I mean, it's no different than the Wikipedia idea. It's just putting it, to me, it's just putting it in a more visible place where people can do this kind of collaborative process, not just for Wikipedia posts, Wikipedia style posts, but for regular social content. So I really like the possibility of that because I think, to me, that could open up like a good source of news. Like if I want to see what's happening, like what's changed, what's controversial, I think edits could be a place that easily reflects that. Okay, so Kieran asks, what about other clients? Do they see replies to specific versions? No. If you're in a client that doesn't know anything about edits, all you're going to see is the original immutable content. You'll see replies to the original, and some things won't make sense, right? If the original changed and people are replying based on that edit, there could be some confusion. I don't think that breaks Nostr, though. Maybe it does. So edits only are implemented in Amethyst, and I give Vitor credit for building a lot of things that they don't always catch on, right? It might be a good idea, like here's a way to make sure that your image host doesn't rug you by at least people can tell that your image host rugged you. That's just one example. I hope the edit functionality doesn't become another item in the graveyard of cool things that were built on Amethyst that no one else was interested in. I think edits are really interesting. So for me, the next step was, okay, we have this this new standard for how to do edits and edit suggestions, but how can we get more visibility into it for people on other clients that don't understand this new event kind? So I think there's a little bit of progress in this area. The Nostrdevs developer, I believe he mentioned something about creating a feed of edits, or maybe it was the edit suggestions. So that's something I'd very much like to see. Just doing what I can on my side, I decided to turn my own profile into a bot for now. So now Captain Stacks is just a bot that reposts everyone's edit suggestions. And I built a little web of trust thing into it too. So if I don't trust you, I'm not going to repost your stuff. But there's over 2,000 users in this web of trust. So, and if anyone has ideas if anyone wants to make quality edits and I'm not on the list, just DM me and I can add you to the list. Because I'm doing these as a repost, if from what I've seen, any client that doesn't understand the edit kind, that I think it's 1010, you're not going to see anything at all. So you're not going to get spammed by me unless you're using Amethyst. But various clients have ways of doing a best effort to display content they don't understand. So I noticed in Nostrdevs, if I'm reposting the edit, which it doesn't understand, it doesn't show anything at all. But if I embed the event in the content, it will show the event as like an unknown, well, not even unknown. It knows that it's a edit event, and it displays it as kind of a raw event. So I thought about making another bot that would post the edits in that way. So that way, people who don't have Amethyst or don't have an Android phone or something like that are still able to see this content, because then they could see it on Nostrdevs. This all might be unnecessary if the Nostrdevs dev builds the thing he was talking about. So I'm going to hold off on that for a little while, but I still see the edits as a very interesting area to explore. Personally, I've been trying to get away from constantly watching basically the fire hose of Nostr events in real time. As much as I can enjoy it and get addicted to it, it's a better use of my time to have some way of just trying to get the highlights, and that's something that AI could definitely help with. I'm very interested in what can be done without AI and complicated algorithms, and I suspect that the edit suggestions could evolve into a pretty good source of signal, because it represents things that people disagree over. And especially when that idea is combined with the web of trust, it's not just open for any spammer to get on my radar, but anybody within my web of trust who's creating edit suggestions, that's something I'm going to want to pay attention to. Let's see, Kirian says, oh, there are better ways to do the image thing. Yeah, I mean, I was throwing out the image thing as an example. As much as I think it's cool to, have a way to post an image that's like rug resistant, I never use it. So I probably agree with you there. And we didn't need to break all the clients. Well, you know what? I think Nostr is early and experimental enough where it should move fast and break things. In fact, I'm more and more starting to see Nostr as a place to experiment. It didn't really grow the way I expected it to. Even if it doesn't grow, I think it's still very useful as like two things: as the most censorship resistant place to post something, but also as a place where you can just easily experiment. And I haven't really tried developing on the AT protocol yet. I think I will at some point, but I always enjoy how easy it is to hack something together on Nostr. I'd say it's hard to build something right. It's hard to build something in a way that really respects the relays. It's easy to just hard code them and do things like that. But I found it very easy and gratifying to just hack together a quick solution for something. And I think it's the best place to experiment with ideas like this. And that's about all I have. Does anyone have any comments or questions?
What's your take on all the Nostr asset stuff? Like whenever I log into Nostr, I just like Nostr assets stuff.
Okay, so Carr is asking about Nostr assets. I don't know a whole lot about it, but I think it has to do with taproot assets, which the whole idea doesn't appeal to me. I think the idea is trying to jam together too many different things, like using Lightning as a protocol to handle assets other than Bitcoin doesn't really make sense to me. I'm not against people making new credit systems, like decentralized credit systems. I just don't see why that should be built on Lightning. If people want to build that on Nostr, I think that's probably great. But I think Nostr assets specifically, if they have that dependency with Lightning, doesn't make a lot of sense to me. All right, so with that, I think we're going to call it